Hello, everyone. Today I have the privilege of interviewing Dr. Daniel Ansari. Thank you for joining us this day on this interview.
Great to be here, Diane.
Yeah, we are so looking forward to having you at our annual conference in a couple of weeks, it seems now. Time just keeps ticking. But yeah, we're thrilled to be able to hear more from you and to look at how what you're doing can influence and support what we're doing with our students. So to start us off, I guess I wonder, like, what drew you to this, exploring this connection between neuroscience and math instruction?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, so I was an undergraduate in psychology and became really interested in child development, and
Ah,
then did my PhD on the numerical abilities of children with Williams syndrome, which is a rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorder. And then found myself as a first position in the Faculty of Education. And that's when I realized that there are many links to be made, right? And when you study something like math, you automatically think about it because it's so important for children. It's predictive of
yeah.
later skills. So it was sort of my career, but starting in psychology, then ending up in the Faculty of Education, and thinking about how can we make links, how can we make the science more impactful.
Yeah. Well, that whole connection of neuroscience, of course, was, I wouldn't say is a new field now, but certainly such a growing knowledge of connecting education and neurology and psychology and that piece coming together. So obviously this is a passion of yours. You've been in it now for a while. Tell us a little bit about that neuroscience and learning and your involvement at Western University related to math.
Mhm. Yeah, so we've been studying sort of the connections between the brain and learning for over 20 years with a particular focus on math, but also the psychological level is always really important
Mm,
as well, right? So I
yeah.
like to refer as this field not so much neuroscience and education, but more mind, brain, and education, because then you also have the psychological level. And at
Mm,
Western, I run the Numerical Cognition Lab, which is a group of researchers who focus on all kinds of aspects of math development. We work on things such as developing early screeners to better understanding the neural basis of arithmetic problem solving. We think about issues related to how children learn fractions, how they understand the place value system. We are also very committed to doing work that is more international, so working with partners around the world
mm.
to better understand learning variability in different contexts. So we do a number of different things with this, but all focused on numeracy and mathematics broadly defined, but using a variety of different types of approaches.
Amazing. And so, we at NILD have our own RX for math courses. And as an instructor for one of those, I'm finding that whole piece of, so many people think, math is just for a certain population and the rest of us just have to kind of make it happen. And so hearing, math that involves so much of our lives and those connections, I think helps us realize that lots of kids can be taught it and learn it and grow in it. So exciting. At our conference, you're going to talk about this particular topic of numeracy. Um, and of course, cognition and numeracy and the mind, of course, can't be separated. But can you give us a glimpse into that workshop of what you feel educators may be missing?
Yeah, I'm not so sure educators are missing necessarily anything, but
Okay.
I do think that there is perhaps sometimes people are more aware of
Mm,
the science behind how we learn how to read, and with the
yeah.
recent right to read inquiry from the Ontario Human Rights Commission, that's all become we talk about that a lot. When it comes to math, I think it's perhaps there's less of an awareness. So what I hope to bring in that workshop is by drawing an analogy to reading to explore what are some of the foundational building blocks of early numeracy. And how can we look out for them, and how can we identify students who are falling behind early on? Because just like in reading, numeracy is highly cumulative, and if you miss certain building blocks, you're really going to struggle. And so that's really what the workshop is focused on. Also talking about some ways in which we can playfully introduce fundamental concepts of early math to children. And also I'll talk a little bit about the role of gender and dispel some myths around that. So that's sort of what I have planned. We'll bring in some neuroscience. We'll bring in some behavioral studies. We'll talk a little bit about screening and the importance thereof. And so that's sort of the plan.
Yeah, amazing. And such important work that you're doing, but certainly all of us, as we're in the thick of it with our students, we're looking for, well, how else can we help this student? Because so often as I talk to parents who are calling me to say, how can you help my child? It is reading, but as much they're struggling with math.
Yeah.
And so I love that. And I love that you brought in the science of reading as, that's where our focus has been. And so let's bring up the science of math and and how do we help kids in the trenches? You'll also be diving into some pieces on dyscalculia, which has been not widely understood and isn't identified in DSM. As dyscalculia. What misconception or what's one thing you could say about that to us now as a little teaser?
Yeah, no, it is right. It's no longer a separate category in the DSM. There used to be one, but I think there's a growing neither dyslexia doesn't have one either anymore. No. They all fall under specific learning disorder. Yeah. And I think therein lies a really important recognition by the people who put the DSM together, which is that these learning difficulties are frequently co-occur. And so the perhaps one myth that I can dispel is that it is very rare to find a student who struggles with math who doesn't also present with other difficulties, be that in reading or be that attention related difficulties. What is really sort of been a problem that we haven't solved is we don't yet understand what underlies that. Is that because there's a common cause, that gives rise to these difficulties, or do these just coexist but have independent causes? So I'll talk a little bit about that, but I think it's really important to recognize that that students who have math difficulties, they may also have other difficulties, but they should be treated differently from students who have only got math difficulties, which are really rare. And in that context, I think one more thing I'd like to say is I'll also talk about the importance of abandoning the IQ achievement discrepancy criteria. So the idea that, only students can be labeled as having a math learning difficulty or dyslexia if there is a significant difference between their IQ and their math abilities. Because research that I will shows students who have math difficulty with or without an IQ achievement discrepancy look the same. So there is no need to include that because it is a criteria that can also exclude learners, right? Who have low IQ and low math. But we need to look just at the math difficulties and not use IQ in a diagnostic sense. And there's lots of research to show that, but I know it's a very persistent use across different jurisdictions. So, but the research just has said for many, many decades, that's not the right approach.
Love it. Thank you. That is so enlightening to me already. So I'm so looking forward to hearing more about that. Tell us I'm very curious about the numerical cognition laboratory that you have at Western. Can you tell us a little bit about how this connects with research, or how that classroom and research connect there?
Yeah, so we have over the course of 20 years built a lot of connections with local school boards. So we do a lot of research that connects directly with school boards. And we try to also address issues in our research that are relevant to what's happening in classrooms. So just to give you one idea, we have this very persistent disagreement in math education of how best to teach students. Some will strongly advocate that we need to teach them multiple strategies, and others will say we need to teach them the standard algorithm. It turns out that this debate is not underpinned by a lot of research in either direction. And so we've been working on projects that try to get at this without any preconceptions, but just to sort of say, like, well, what actually works? So, and then, of course, we do a lot of work around early screening, and that also connects with schools. So we do a lot of work that connects with our school board partners. We're trying to build more partnerships, not just here in Ontario, but across the country. To do more research, especially in screening, but also on other aspects of math instruction and building awareness around things such as dyscalculia and mathematics anxiety.
Yeah, of course, the anxiety piece. That's amazing. And I love that you have this laboratory, because it's kind of like the research, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? That connection of, okay, let's work with school, let's practice what's going on. So thank you for sharing that, and we look forward to hearing more. So at our upcoming conference, which the title of Neuroscience, Numeracy, and Meaningful Math Instruction, you'll be presenting those, or two of those workshops. I'm sure you have so much more to say, and probably more than those two workshops, but we're thankful for that, and we are certainly looking forward to seeing you and hearing you, and then applying what we learn in our therapy practice, and even educators that are joining us as classroom teachers. So yeah, we look forward to this little partnership that we can have with you. So thank you, and we will see you at the conference.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.